All right, hey family. So we are out here at the Tijeras Ranger Station, and they have a paved path, a wheelchair accessible path, as well as a wheelchair accessible bathroom. So we're going to take you guys down the trail a little bit and show you some different plants that you can learn along the way. So this ecosystem is actually really kind of cool because it's basically where a Pinyon juniper woodland meets a riparian ecosystem. So a riparian ecosystem is basically anything that borders water. So if you think about the bosque is a riparian ecosystem. An ecosystem around a lake are all going to be considered riparian ecosystems. And so I want to take you guys over and show you this plant really quick. So this plant right here, is the plant that people basically love to hate here in New Mexico. It's an invasive species. It's a Siberian elm. It actually is from Siberia, and it took root here in the 20s. And so when you guys come and visit this plant, I want you to think about when it was introduced. Most of these trees live about 80 to 100 years, and they were introduced in the 20s. And so it's interesting because you see a lot of trees that are dying off because they were introduced during the Great Depression. And the whole reason it was introduced during the Great Depression was actually by Governor Tingley, who basically passed the seeds out like candy because he wanted more shade in this desert ecosystem. So not only is it in the city, but it's also out here. Obviously it propagates and it grows really, really well in our ecosystem, and that's why it's so incredibly invasive. And some people hate them. Other people think, you know, they're a nice bit of shade in the city. So they have jagged leaves. If you guys see the margins, it's a serrated leaf margin, and you can see most of them are covered in these holes. They introduced the Elm Leaf Beetle. I'm not exactly sure when, but they introduced it thinking that it would control the population of Siberian elm or any kind of elm tree that was invasive. Turns out does nothing to manage it. It really just makes the leaves look really, really ugly. So that's kind of funny. But the bark on these is pretty gray. You can see the branches, and yeah, they are everywhere. Once you see one, you'll start seeing them everywhere. The leaves are relatively small with margins along the leaves. Branches are gray. Trunks, you know, have regular like furrowed bark like a regular tree would. All right, guys, so here we have the one seed juniper. Now, the one seed juniper, there's three types of junipers out here in this region that grow naturally, but this one is the one that you're going to see most often. And what's really cool about the one seed junipers is they are dioecious, which means they are male plants and they're female plants. And you can tell really easily. The female plants are covered in like seeds. They're called juniper berries. They're actually modified cones, but they're called berries. They can be different colors, anywhere from like blue to purple to green, depending on the species. And then the males have these pollen cones. So if you ever see a juniper in the spring, they're really orange, and that means it's a male. Now I want to show you something really interesting because nature is never like black and white, right? There's a lot of gray in nature. And if you see right here, this is obviously a male juniper, but if you can see that right there, whoop, that is a juniper berry, which means that on this whole male tree, there's one spot where it produced a berry like a female would. So that's kind of cool and unique. And we're about to get on this trail, you guys. And the trail is, it is a kind of a crusher fine trail. So it's wide enough for wheelchairs, and it is definitely passable. Just know that you'll probably be pushing a little bit harder than you would on like a concrete or an asphalt trail. And then as you guys are out here, here's what's really cool is it goes through the history of the Tijeras Pueblo. So as you're walking through all these trails, you're going to learn a lot about the native people who once inhabited this land. And so not only are you learning a little bit about the ecosystem through this video, but when you come, you'll be able to learn about the native people as well. And then right above me here, we have a pinyon pine tree, pinyon pine. As you guys well know, these produce the pinyon nuts that we all love. And I don't think I am tall enough to reach a needle. They obviously trim the branches going up, but pinyon pines have two needles in a bunch. They're also called the Colorado pinyon pine. They've called the two needle pinyon pine as well. And so this is the two needle pinyon pine, two needles to a bunch, and the needles are you know, maybe 2 to 3 inches at their longest. They're relatively short needles. A lot of pines have much longer needles. These guys are relatively short. And what's cool about them, they are really, really slow growers. So if you see a relatively big pinyon pine tree, you can go ahead and assume it's been there for hundreds of years because they grow so incredibly slowly. And these three trees, guys, I've seen all around the bridge. So when you come here, you're going to walk across the bridge, and you're going to be able to see the elm trees. Let me show you the bridge. You're going to be able to see the elm trees and the Seed Juniper, as well as the Siberian elm. All right, guys, so those are the only plants that we're going to talk about. I feel like 3 is a really good number. We also found a harvester ant mound here. So if you guys see that, one thing that's really cool about harvester ant mounds is they're really easy to recognize and to identify, because essentially they look like this moonscape. They're not always mounded. Sometimes they're totally flat, but they're covered. It's like the ants basically remove all the vegetation around it, and then they put these tiny rocks all over this space. And so in my opinion, it looks like a moonscape. Like if you were to go visit the moon, it would be totally barren and just covered in dirt and rocks. And that's what it looks like to us. So harvester ants are really important to the local ecosystem. They aerate soils, they disperse seeds, right? They are harvester ants. They harvest seeds and they disperse them when they grow elsewhere. And so, yeah, and they feed a lot of animals. Horned lizards, if you guys love horned lizards, this is like 80% of their diet is harvester ants. And so it's a really important part of the overall ecosystem. Not only do they help the soil, but they're also a really important part of the food chain. So that's our video for today. We're at the Tijeras Ranger Station and the trail for the Tijeras Pueblo. Again, the trails are walkable with the wheelchair, but you are going to have to push a little bit harder because they are that, you know, it's not asphalt or cement. So just kind of know that coming in. There's fun bridges that the kids can go over and play on, and lots of things to see out here. All right, have a good one.